Aloha and good afternoon. The meeting of the Housing, Human Services, and Transportation Committee will now come to order. It is 2:32 p.m. on Thursday, December 14, 2017. Thank you, members, for being here. At this time, before we go any further, may I please request that we all turn off or silence our cell phones or other noise-making devices. At this time, I'd like to introduce our committee voting members. I'm Stacy Crivello, your chair. Our committee vice chair, aloha, Bob Carroll.
Aloha, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Council Member Alika Atai.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Thank you for being here. Council Member Don Guzman.
Happy holidays, Chair.
Thank you. And Council Member Kelly King.
Aloha,
thank you
Chair.
for being here. Member Ricky Hokama is excused. And for the moment, Council Chair Mike White. At this time, I'd like to introduce also with us as our non-voting members. Thank you for taking the time. We have with us Yukile Sugimura.
Aloha, Chair.
Aloha. And Council Member Ellie Cochran.
Aloha.
Thank you for being here. At this time, I'd like to introduce our Corporation Counsel, from Deputy Corporation Counsel Jeff Ueoka. And of course, sitting in the gallery, we also have Deputy Corporation Counsel Gary Murai. In a little while, we'll be having our department representatives, and they're in the gallery. Kara Ryman, Director, Department of Housing and Human Concerns, and Buddy Almeida. Thank you for being here. Today, we have two items on our agenda, and later on, we'll invite our resource personnel to come and join us for HHT-27. With us also is committee staff, committee secretary, Stacy Vinare, our legislative analyst, Shelley Espeleta, and legislative analyst, Saumalu Mataafa. So before we get into the discussion, let's get started with public testimony. Assisting us this afternoon from the Hana District Office is Don Lono.
Good afternoon, Chair. This is Dawn Lono at the Hana office, and there's no one waiting to testify.
And from the Lanai District Office is Denise Fernandez.
Good afternoon, Chair. This is Denise Fernandez on Lanai, and there is no one waiting to testify.
Thank you. And for the Molokai District Office is Ella Alcon.
Good afternoon, Chair. This is Ella Alcon on Molokai, and there is no one here waiting to testify.
Thank you, ladies. In the possibility of anyone showing up, will you please email our staff? For individuals who will be testifying in the chamber, please sign up at the desk located in the 8th floor lobby just outside the chamber door. If you will be testifying from the remote testimony location specified on the meeting agenda, please sign up with council staff at the location. Testimony will be limited to the items listed on the agenda today. Pursuant to the rules of the council, each testifier will be allowed to testify for up to 3 minutes per item. At 2.5 minutes, the light will turn yellow, signaling 30 seconds remaining. At 3 minutes, the light will blink red, which is a signal for you to please end your testimony. When testifying, please state your name and the name of any organization you are representing. Staff, please call our first testifier.
Chair, the first testifier is Kaimaile Makekau, followed by Kelly Polly.
Aloha, Chair. Aloha, Council. Happy holidays. Mele kalikimaka. My name is Kaimaile Makekau, and everything I have to say is involving housing. When I was born to two 16-year-olds who were highly strung out on drugs. I wasn't given the education or the respectable rights to, or any kind of bring up to have a good job. I was subjected to drugs, molestation, and I had a hard time. Nobody helping me with homework, I transferred from school to school. I was given to 18 schools in my life. My father went to prison for 25 years. My mother was strung out on drugs. She's on welfare. Everybody in my family is having a hard time. My family consists of me and my baby alone right now, and I'm living at the homeless shelter. I'm there, and they're only allowed for 3 months, and I just gave birth. I'm a single mother, and I'm trying to find housing right now, which, of course, I need to find childcare. Childcare is impossible right now, as you've seen on the newspaper on Friday, that there's one childcare provider to 34 children, and they only are allowed 2 infants per childcare provider. There is none. And for me to be finding a job and a house, they're giving me till February 1st to find my own home. I'm having such a hard time, and I know this is involving affordable housing, but I was just hoping that the board and all of you would also look into low-income housing for people who, like myself, who are subjected to no family, no education, no jobs. I mean, the jobs are being given to people who are highly more educated. Of course, I've been subjected to a life of crimes from my family, and so I have felonies, and I'm trying to better myself, but I'm not finding jobs that are suitable for myself. And so I just recently found a job, but my childcare situation is out of control. The low-income housing has a 2 to 5 year waiting list, and I'm kind of scared because if my time comes up on the February 1st and I don't find childcare or housing, my child and I will be on the streets again. And I'm trying to take my child out of the life of drugs, homelessness, starvation, and anything else that I've been subjected to in my life because of hard living. So I'm hoping that you guys can please help with the low-income housing situation as well as affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any clarification or comments for the testifier? Thank you. Next testifier.
Chair, the next testifier is Kelly Polly, followed by Charles Jenks.
I need to get my composure because that story just shredded me apart. Good morning, Council. My name is Kelly Polly. I'm a mother, a business owner, and I live in Kihei. I'm here to testify on HH2-27. I first want to start off by saying thank you to the County Council members for your service, your time, for being here. I just feel like you guys don't get thanked enough. You guys get actually quite criticized, and I'm not here to do that today. So thank you, each and every one of you for that. I also want to say thank you for having affordable housing as a topic. It's a forefront of your minds, and that's another great thing to celebrate. It means you're thinking about it. It means that you recognize the people like the one that was just here, that we need affordable housing. And so please, I hope that you consider my testimony. You take it with what you can, even maybe a grain of salt, and whatever you can learn from my testimony, just know that I'm here to help each and every one of you fight this housing crisis, whether it's purchasing or renting. I am concerned about this bill. It appears to be something from the outside, but maybe not quite what it should be. I can only picture it like a pretty bright Christmas present wrapped with beautiful ribbons and bows, appealing to all who see it. However, when you unwrap it and you see it, you don't know what it is, and you can't understand it. I feel like this is what this bill is for normal people, especially the beautiful girl who just testified. They get lost in the translation. For me, as a professional, I was part of the original committee. How many years ago? I feel like it was 2003 because I was pregnant with my 3rd daughter, and we were part of the committee that, pushed Maui County, got the word out, sign waving, going to meetings, and got Maui County to vote to put the 2% of the real property county taxes aside for this affordable fund. I was there. I was there with my pregnant belly and then my infant baby at that time. I know what its intention was, and I can tell you that I'm not just somebody that got a glimpse of what's happening. I heard the word affordable, and I think it means good, so I want to testify on something that may actually, in the end, kill affordable housing going vertical. We need to focus on getting the land and wood and concrete, and we need to go vertical. Oh my gosh, I have so much to say. I want to also just say that there's an unfair rumor going around that many have sold and run away with the profits because their 10 years lifted. Is there a survey that shows how many people bought and how many people did it? And why are we writing bills to punish everyone else for those few people that right now is still rumors? That's not the way to do it. I have so much more, and I don't want to be disrespectful. I will send everybody a copy of my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any clarification or questions or comments for the testifier? Mr. Guzman?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for being here. I think I did attend a workshop where you were, I think, one of the key speakers. And I was looking at the ordinance itself, and I was trying to go through the formula. Are you familiar with any of the formulas that are attempting to walk us through the ordinance? I'm a little bit lost. I mean, I'm not a professional in the industry, so would you happen to know how this is based? Or
yes, if you would allow me to answer that in a way that people can understand, and then I would love to talk to you more about that. First of all, I've been lending here in Maui County, born and raised, although also for 16, almost 17 years. And to be honest, not to condemn or criticize, we are here to share, we are here to support, and we are here to encourage. That's the goal. But whoever, was it council services? I don't know who, but whoever did write this, it appears that it's possible they may not have ever gone through a closing, home of a closing escrow before because of the details on here. I'm doing my own closings. I sign my buyers. I'm funding the loans. I'm qualifying them. You can just with the specifics, and I'd like to show that to you later. And one other thing that is on the same lines that I also want to point out to answer your question is there are so many projects that were affordable. 100% of the projects were affordable 10, 15, 20 years ago. Kihei Villages, South Point, Parkside, there's so many that were done. They were not deed restrictions. They were not in perpetuity. And if we look at them today without all this micromanagement, and we go and say, what's market value? And we're peak. Everybody knows market's peak right now. That's no surprise. Purchase price $285. A 0% down payment. Who can afford 0% right now in this room? 0% means nada, okay? 0% down payment, USDA loan, primary residence, mortgage payment, $1,333. HO6 walls-to-walls insurance, $25. After the $200,000 exempt, your tax on the 85, you're probably about minimum tax rate $250 for the year, which is $20.83. PMI for the loan, $130. A total payment for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath with market value that used to be affordable, no deed restrictions, total to the client, $1,793. $1,793. And that doesn't even begin to talk about the tax credit refund they're going to get when they file the IRS, a minimum of $200 more a month.
Thank
That's
you.
a payment under $1,500.
Yeah,
Is that?
So we don't need to micromanage the process. We need to build. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll get with you afterwards.
Thank you.
I'll apologize for that, Chair.
Chair, the next testifier is Charles Jenks, testifying on HHT 27. He'll be followed by Tom Crowley.
Good afternoon, members. Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to testify. Appreciate it. My name is Charles Jenks. I'm here testifying on my own behalf. I started working for the County of Maui in 1991, and I've been involved in some form or another with affordable housing since then to the current day. And I just wanted to bring to you my point of view on the proposed revisions to 2.96. Some of you were around. Well, actually, maybe Bob, and maybe that's it. In 2006, when the original workforce housing bill was passed, it went through a number of committee meetings. The economic community, economists, landowners, builders, entitlement consultants, the real estate community, the financial community said, don't do this. The council went ahead anyway and passed 2.96 in 2006, and the net result of that effort to get affordable housing built in 8 years was 12 units built. 3 of those actually closed under the provisions of 2.96. 3 units. The rest of the units, 9 of them, went to the marketplace because people didn't want to buy a unit with all of the all the requirements required by 2.96, of which occupancy and resale restrictions were key issues. 8 years later, in 2014, I sat on the task force that was appointed by Mayor Eleanor Alcala to revisit 2.96, and we did that. We had I sat down with Maui Tomorrow, believe it or not, and we had a discussion on the issues, why we couldn't get affordable housing built per 2.96. The result of that were changes to the issue of perpetuity for rental housing, eliminating that, making it 25 years, and eliminating the 25-year owner occupancy requirement for owner-occupied units and giving a sliding scale so that it encouraged people to stay in their units. Well, here we are today. And since 2014, you've seen a resurgence in the development community. There's now units being built. Some of those units are being built per 2.96 and some of them not. Some of them that are not being built are being built with 201H projects, permitting issued by you, without some of the restrictions in 2.96, which tells you something. So here we are today. We now have a bill in front of you. Coincidentally, next year is an election year. So we have a bill that talks about adding more requirements back, going back to 2006. You know, empirically, you can prove that what you approved in 2006 didn't work, yet we want to go back and revisit in perpetuity for affordable housing. It simply does not work. There are some ideas in here that are worth discussing. For example, the idea of increasing return on equity based upon occupancy. Great idea. It needs further discussion. I encourage you to follow up on that idea. But this idea of in perpetuity doesn't work. You're wasting your time. You will get nothing out of this result. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for the testifier? Thank you for being here, Mr. Jenks.
Chair, the next testifier is Tom Crowley, testifying on HHT 27, followed by Michael Trotto.
Before you begin, I'd like to recognize at this time Chair White. Thank you for being here.
Aloha, Chair, and aloha, committee members. I'm Tom Crowley, testifying on my own behalf. Affordable housing cannot be created through regulations. I hope we've learned that. It's done through a cooperative effort between development, government, and nonprofits. It needs to be enabling legislation that comes from this body, not more restrictive legislation. It's wise that the Workforce Housing Ordinance contains a provision that says every 2 years the council shall review it. And they should be looking at what's working, what's not working, and tweaking it to try to make it work better. The measure under consideration today has a noble intent. The noble intent is we want these affordables to stay affordable in perpetuity. But it is not well thought out, and it's just one more regulation that will lead to less rather than more affordable housing being built. This measure contains the measure concerns what happens when affordables are sold years from now. I'll tell you what I'm concerned about. What happens when affordables are sold today? Right now, as we speak, the Kahoma Village Project is having an informational meeting, and they've had a series of these. It says that they have room for 150 people at each of a number of sessions. I hope they're filled. I hope that there's people that are coming out for this. But I will say, this advertisement in the newspaper, it's meeting the legal requirement for this. But if I'm a home buyer, if I'm a first-time home buyer, this isn't making me run to the bank and say, hey, can I get a mortgage on one of these? Because it's just regulations. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know anything about the subdivision. However, I'm going to show where this begins to fail. Kamalani in Kihei. 170 units were slated to be affordables. They're in the process of being constructed right now. You know, they are not going to be sold to the people that fit in the workforce housing, most of them, because they had to make that commitment way before they were ever built. So now that they are built, okay, the 270 days has expired, so they're allowed to go to market rate. So if you go down there right now, you can buy these affordables at market, rate. Now, they haven't raised the price. The price is still the same, but they're going forward without any restrictions. So that shows that the workforce housing ordinance and what's in there, it's not working. It's not putting the houses into the hands of the people that we intended for those houses to go. That's what we should be discussing today. Those are the things that this council has to address about how our regulations are working. And please don't get me started on Front Street Apartments. I gave you guys the information about Front Street Apartments. We already have the deed restrictions on that property to ensure that they stay affordable for 51 years. Don't listen to somebody from the state who says they've met their IRS requirement, they don't have to be affordable anymore. That's wrong. But somebody has to enforce it. So I'm asking you guys to take the lead and do that. So regulations are not going to get us more affordable housing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Mr. Crowley? Thank you.
Chair, the next testifier is Michael Trotto, testifying on HHT 27, followed by Tom Cook.
Good afternoon, Chair Crivello and members of the committee. My name is Michael Trotto. I'm a resident of Kihei. I'm also the board president of Nahalio Maui. I want to thank you, Chair, for continuing to advocate for solutions to the affordable housing needs of our county. There is no silver bullet here, folks, when it comes to providing adequate supply of homes for our working families. We are, however, blessed to have the existence of several dedicated nonprofit associations that have been making a truly important contribution to providing affordable housing. The one thing that all of these groups have in common as a common denominator is that they are all laser focused on their respective models, missions, and capabilities. And this is what makes them successful. Like I said, there's no silver bullet. It's not one size fits all. Each one of these organizations do an excellent job in their models, and they should be allowed to continue. So, how does the county work? How do they fit into this? The county must follow the directions of these organizations. They must, and we must, establish a true housing department in the county of Maui with a leader that is abundantly qualified to get the job done. This person must possess all the tools necessary to be able to get housing built, financed, occupied by qualified homeowners, and also be able to negotiate resales when that becomes necessary. And the most important thing, this has to be that person's sole mission. The clock is ticking, folks. We have many working families that need a place to call home. I respectfully request that this council continue to support these groups from the Affordable Housing Fund. I thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I wish you all Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments or clarification? Mr. Guzman?
Clarification. Thanks, Mike. Is this, you were testifying on HHT 32 or HHT 27? Okay, and yeah. This is in support of or opposition of?
A part of 27 is the in perpetuity. And as you know, Nahalio Maui does provide homes in perpetuity, but that's not works for everybody, and I agree with that. You can't have that for all cases. We do well in our program. We do very well in that, but it's not going to work for Lokai Pacific. It won't work for Habitat for Humanities. So that's the part. That's why I came to testify today, to show. You have to look with a broad, you have to look at the whole board. You can't not just say, okay, this is going to work, and then say, we're going to make, it has to be in perpetuity or anything like that. You can't, you have to look at everything. So our like I said, Nahali works. The things that Lakahi does work. Habitat for Humanity works. So we've got to integrate it, but we need someone to lead the ship. And that person has to be focused on housing and getting it built.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chair, the next testifier is Tom Cook, testifying on HHT 27, followed by Stan Franco.
Good afternoon, Chair, council members. My name is Tom Cook. I'm a super advocate of affordable housing. I'm glad that you're addressing it. I'm a general contractor. I build. I started as a laborer and a carpenter. I could do takeoffs, material lists, procurement, site work, grading, concrete, framing, get the whole thing. I could build all the housing that we need. There's a lot of other talented contractors on the island who can also build it. We are not lacking the capacity to build homes. We need land, entitled buildable land, and we need building permits. It is extremely frustrating because people want to build. I have people who want to build a house. They have the money. You can't get a permit. Okay? Permit process needs to be addressed. That's one of the issues that will help us in our housing needs of the island. Encouragement, support, cultivating, enabling, a lot of positive adjectives. That's what we need to bring to the table and work together. More regulation is just making it smaller and smaller and tighter. I agree with the gentleman or a person earlier. You're not going to solve this problem through ordinances. Please don't take offense, but I would like you to pass an ordinance that you can't pass any more ordinances. And that, if you think about it, logically, a tremendous amount of the things that I see the county addressing, there are already rules and laws and regulations, and a lot of times it's trying to close a loophole or tighten it up or encourage or enable it and improve it. Let's unwind all this. If you had house lots that somebody could buy for $80,000, like you used to be able to, but to save me the water bill, or show me the water bill, killed that. Pukalani Terrace, Maui Meadows, Maui Ranch Estates. All these different subdivisions. They didn't sell houses. Those weren't developers building on it. Frank Moniz guys, they did lots. They developed a buildable property, and you could buy a lot, and you hire a guy like me, and I'll build your house for $200 grand. Okay? We can build it. We can do it. But we don't have any inventory. And so now we're in a situation where the only people who are building are the really big guys. And on one hand, they have the efficiency. And the other hand, they get choke overhead, man. They're it's big, big business. There's a lot of little guys on the island who can build homes and are good at it. But we don't have any place to build, and we can't get any permits. As far as the 250 grand, the administration should be doing their job insofar as the permitting process and the housing. I'm not supportive of you guys spending another 250 grand. I think the people that are in place to do it should be doing it. And if the council and the administration can work together, we're here to help. So thank you for your ear.
Thank you. Any questions or clarification? Councilman.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Mr. Cook, sorry, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Because you talked about needing buildable land, and so we have 50 lots at Maui Lani. I don't think they're all buildable because some of them are too close to the wall that is in question.
Mm-hmm.
But is that one area where if the price for the lot were low enough, and because the county does subsidize affordable housing, so if we looked at that as a subsidy and put those lots out for sale for affordable, is that the kind of thing you're talking about, where then someone would buy a lot at a low affordable price and then come and hire an independent contractor to build their house?
Yes, and it would be challenging if there was a bunch of restrictions. This is how I envision it. Somebody buys a lot. It might take them 5 or 6 years. They're making payments. It's a smaller down payments on a lot. They can go have a picnic, their kids, they're working, they have a goal. They own a lot, and they're working towards building their house. That's also our community coming together and being more of a community. So just that function of somebody being able to get a lot, they might not be able to build for 5 years. And that's one of the things you have to keep in mind with what you're suggesting, is that, a person getting a lot and getting a home down the road is not a bad thing. It's it's just not going to happen overnight. So anyway, I hope that answers.
Okay. Well, yeah, because I think right now we have a RFP going out that will require all those lots to be sold together, but there was a proposal from someone in the community or a group in the community to put those lots out individually and let folks, buy them at a lower rate. And,
I would vote for that.
okay, just wanted to get your opinion on
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, the next testifier is Stan Franco, testifying on HHT 32 and HHT 27, followed by Sandra Aki.
I never want to follow Tom. Tom is a friend. Dear Stacy and members of the Housing, Human Concerns, and Transportation Committee, my name is Stan Franco, and I speak for Face Maui and its organizations. Merry Christmas. I feel gifted today with reasonable good health on this day of my 74th birthday. And you thought I was 65, right? And the second gift is the $250,000 you placed in the budget for affordable housing policy and implementation analysis. I thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. On item HHT 32, over the past year, Face Maui has spent many hours of meetings within our organization and with you and others trying to figure out how, as a community, we would spend the gift of $250,000 for the benefit of all of Maui County's residents. And I'm proud to say that I think we have produced a great product called a Request for Qualifications. We have met with each of you individually about the Request for Qualification product, and except for a few comments during our 9 meetings with you, I did not hear any major objection to our proposal. The meat of this proposal is that what we refer to is the Qualifications Review Committee. This will be a committee made up of representatives from the County Council, County Administration, and organizations which work on affordable housing. There are 3 beautiful ladies here that represent affordable housing. They should be on this committee. They should be on this committee. We believe that the most experienced in the affordable housing business would be the decision makers in selecting a housing consultant to create a plan for building homes our people need. We are here today to work together to make truly affordable housing available for our ohana, our children and grandchildren. Because if not, they are going to move to the mainland. And all the hours we have worked to keep Maui, Molokai, and Lanai for them will be lost. I do not want my grandchildren to say to me when I'm 90 years old, Grandpa, why did you not try to make homes available for us? Why did you not try? United, we can. United, we can. Divided, we cannot. I want to speak on the second item, Madam Chair. On the second topic of the agenda, HHT 27, I think we as the county must do better than 5, 8, and 10-year deed restrictions. I'm not sure what the shared appreciation method proposed is the best way to go, and I'm all ears when the panel has this discussion. However, I believe strongly that we need a minimum of a 30-year deed restriction. The affordable housing project, in an affordable housing project, the deal is the developer has lower costs with the waiver of county fees and restrictions. The buyer gets a lower cost on her home, and the rest of us should not have to build more affordable housing after 5, 8, or 10 years. Why? We only need to look to Front Street Apartments to see the problems our people face when owners convert affordable housing units to market after only 15 years, as Tom mentioned. You have heard the worry. They have come to the council of the residents of Front Street Apartments, and we have acted by sending a resolution to the state of Hawaii to help us keep these housing units affordable. We need to do better. When the developer comes to us and asks to remove certain requirements like permit fees or zoning restrictions, and we say yes to their requests, we must ask for more than from them. Habitat for Humanity, for example, has a 30-year restriction, deed restriction on its homes. We should settle for no less than that. Again, Merry Christmas. Thank you for listening, and best wishes to you and your family during this season of peace and joy. God bless.
Thank you. Councilmember King.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, happy birthday. I was going to say that anyway because I saw it on Facebook. You might be one of the few people who has inspired clapping in the audience after your testimony and not gotten scolded. But I think you deserve it. So I wanted to ask you about the HHT 32, the resolution on I'll call consultant for now. The resolution that we're looking at gives the total authority to hire that position to the chair. Does that concern you, or are you? Because I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you that we should have a stakeholder group looking at the qualifications of the person we're trying to hire. So, is that a concern for you?
I think we need to work with the chair. I think Mike White is a good guy. But I think, again, as I mentioned, I think the community, because there's, we've talked about this and others have come before me to say we have a housing crisis. We got to be all in together on this. And I think the people that build affordable housing should be in the part of the process of selecting our housing consultant. If we're going to create a plan so that we can work forward from here to implement that plan as a county, as the residents of this community, that we need the people sitting right here that's going to be talking to us with the experience. And then, they will then tell Mike, well, this is who we think would be the best. After they evaluate them, we have an evaluation criteria in our product. We could maybe look at that and see if we need to change that, but we have to have an evaluation process, and I think it should be a community-based process. That's my feeling.
Okay, thank you very much. And I also wanted to say that of all people, I think you'd be the last person who would have grandchildren who said, why didn't you do something? Because you've really done a lot. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Franco. And again, happy birthday.
Thank you. Chair, the next testifier is Sandra Aki, testifying on HHT 32, followed by Lawrence Carnicelli.
Aloha Housing Services and Transportation Committee Chair Stacy Crivello, Committee Vice Chair Robert Carroll, members Alika Atai, Don Guzman, Ricky's not here today, Kelly King, Mike White, Ellie Cochran, and Yuki Sugimura. My name is Sandra Key, and I am the president of Halemakana Owaiale Tenant Association, formed in 2014 to address the concerns of the residents of Halemakana Owaiale. I am here today in support of Face Maui's proposal of the hiring of a housing consultant to create an affordable housing plan for Maui County. You have appropriated $250,000 for this work in the 2017-18 county budget. And I ask that you follow through with the recommendation that a committee made up of representatives from our nonprofit organizations, such as Nahali o Maui, Lokahi Pacific, Halemaho'olu, and Face Maui, serve to screen and recommend the housing consultant to be hired by the Maui County Council. I believe that this process to select the housing consultant will bring transparency, accountability, and selection by knowledgeable persons in the affordable housing areas. As a resident of Halemakana Owaiale, I'm surrounded by people in crisis, and I listen to the cries and feel the pain of people every day as they tell me their struggles just to make ends meet living at Halemakana Owaiale. You have the power to ease the pain of the people in this county. And I ask for your support in relieving people from the burdens caused by the lack of truly affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or clarification for the testifier? Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Chair, the next testifier is Lawrence Carnicelli, testifying on HHT 27, followed by Tom Blackburn Rodriguez.
Aloha, Chair Crivello and members. My name is Lawrence Carnicelli, submitting testimony as the Government Affairs Director for the Realtors Association of Maui on HHT 27. I also come today as a published author and a requested speaker on the subjects of inclusionary zoning and shared appreciation. I'm going to start with saying that we are in favor of the stated intent of this bill, which is to build and protect our workforce housing and to preserve the Workforce Housing Fund. However, there's no silver bullet and there's no one solution to the problem. So I'm going to go ahead and just talk about the bill itself, as I kind of do, and I'll just talk about the technical things. There's 4 basic changes that this bill does. One is it moves the workforce housing into perpetuity. 2 is that it creates a formula for resale, which includes shared appreciation. It adds improvements into the formula, and then also makes some changes to the escrow and resale process. When you go into perpetuity, there's 2 kind of basic issues that you're going to run into. The first one's going to be blight. Forever is a long time. And so blight is something you have to address. The second thing you have to address is appreciation. And what I mean by that is actually the loan that somebody can get. You can get a loan on a deed restricted in perpetuity. However, it's going to be a very limited amount of loans that you can get, and the interest rate's going to be higher. So you kind of defeat the purpose. The formula with which is in the bill, it actually is a shared equity should be not, you shouldn't set the resale price on shared equity, because then what happens is market forces are actually what's driving the resale. And even though it's in the program in perpetuity, it's actually not going to remain affordable because the formula is going to kick it out of the affordable quotient. The improvements, they're already included in the value of the property, so we're double dipping by putting the improvements in there again. And then the escrow process just doesn't follow standard Hawaii practice. But the biggest thing I want to talk about is solutions, right? There's 2 solutions that I'm going to focus on right now. The first thing is if you study inclusionary zoning across the nation, there's one thing that every successful program has, and that is stewardship. Without stewardship, you could make the best law in the world, and it's not going to work. You have to have stewardship. The other thing that I'm going to talk about just briefly here that is an easy solution. Keep it simple, stupid. It's called recapture. I'm basically going to just summarize it by saying it would be, say, a secondary or quiet lien that the county puts for the subsidized amount on the back end of the property. So even if it leaves the affordable housing program in 10 years, the fund will get that money back. We don't lose the money. It's called recapture, and that's just summarizing it in a very, very brief thing. But my time is up, Chair, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilmember King?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here, Mr. Carnicelli. Can you just go into detail on your, when you mentioned stewardship, on what that would mean, and how would we put that into an ordinance, or are you suggesting we do?
Well, it could be a person. It could be a panel. It could be a board or a commission. We could split housing and human concerns and actually put, Nahali is a great model, right? When you take a land trust model, they have what I think it's 58 or 59 homes currently. They know every homeowner. They know every property. If you're going to put a deck on the back, somebody's going to talk. You have human interaction. You have humans making decisions, humans that know what's going on. And we haven't set the department up to handle this. It's not anyone's fault or the department's fault. It's just we haven't done that. So we need to set up either an entity, a board, a commission, appoint a person. I don't know, it could be this czar person, but but there needs to be human interaction that keeps track of these. Because if we do this, think about it, when Stan's grandkids have homes, we might have 700 of these things. Without stewardship, without some way to manage it, it's going to just be a nightmare.
Okay, I get what you're talking about. Can I follow up with more question?
Yes, and then Mr. Guzman is after you.
So, and the other word you mentioned earlier, which I don't know if that's a real estate term because I don't understand it, so maybe you can explain it to me, is the word blight?
Blight
regards to
is
perpetuity?
when houses just become decrepit. It's you know, when neighborhoods go bad.
Okay.
You know,
Okay. I didn't know what you were talking about by, okay, I get it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Guzman, Mr. White, clarification.
Thank you, Chair. So when you're talking about the recapture and then
Mm-hmm.
a quiet lien, what does that form of encumbrance look like on a deed? Is that a
If we start getting, see, now we're going to have to probably include title company people and the loan officers because it will affect the loan. But if we just look at it from a conceptual standpoint of, you know, like you might get a first mortgage, second mortgage on your home. So let's just call it a second mortgage.
Okay,
a
that's
second
what
mortgage,
I was thinking.
yeah,
Was a
second
second
mortgage
mortgage,
to the
but-
county.
Okay.
Let's just call it a second
the
mortgage
county,
to the county for the amount of the subsidized portion. So then therefore, we actually get it back. And then eventually, the fund doesn't even, it will maintain itself. It will actually, because, you know, when one house goes out of the affordability quotient, it'll go back into the fund and we can build another house and, you know, and they just sort of cycle. Then you can actually use the fund to make loans against that portfolio and actually leverage it even further by doing that.
But then the second encumbrance, which would be like what you're saying, a second loan to the county, that would have be a fixed percentage, or what is?
Oh, I don't even think you have to put an interest rate on it. Let's just say that it's the dollar amount. These are affordable housing people. Let's not put additional burdens on them. Let's say, listen, it's market rate at $550 and you bought it for $400. So you're going to have a mortgage for $400 and you're going to have a secondary lien of $150 that just sits there, and it's $150. You sell the house, or, you know, let's say if we move it from 10 years to 30 and it goes out in 30 and you sell it, you don't get to keep that $150. That $150 goes back to the fund.
Right.
Right. See, right now what happens is, you know, it kind of goes away in 10 years. Or if you have recapture, you get to keep it, even if it goes out of the program.
Yeah, I see where you're going. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Mr. White?
Yeah, Mr. Guzman asked the same question I was going to ask, because well, you mentioned that the recapture idea hasn't been shared yet. I think all of us members got an email from Doug Spencer basically saying our problem with perpetuity is that we have a market buyer who buys a house right next door to an affordable unit. The price differential is $225,000. When the guy who buys it at market goes to market for, say, a $50,000 increase in the price over what he paid, he gets 200 or the 50,000 less whatever the sales commission is. The guy next door that bought it at an affordable rate gets 275,000 minus the sales commission. So his thought was exactly that. Put a second mortgage on it, and if somebody chooses to sell, the money comes back into the affordable housing fund. My guess is that very few people are going to want to sell if the money's going to go back to the county. So that will kind of, his thought was, this is going to create the perpetuity and still maintain the ability for the fund to be replenished. And I think it was a marvelous idea, and so I appreciate you bringing it up again.
Yeah, if you think about it too, like the worst case scenario is they don't even sell. After 10 years, they just refinance and pocket it. Like that's even worse, which has happened. But even if you know, so yes.
Yeah,
you know,
I think we have the understanding, right?
Yeah.
The clarification.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, just a moment.
Mr. Carnicelli, or Chair. Thank you, Mr. Carnicelli. Can you elaborate more on the recapture in reference to the preservation of affordability point you have in your testimony? You didn't get to that, but it does relate to what you did talk about recapture.
Oh, wait.
Your last number 4.
Oh, the preservation of affordability.
Right.
Yes. The National Association of Realtors statistics shows that the average homeowner stays 10 years. It used to be 6, it's now 10 years. So if our deed restriction, because we use a deed restricted model, if our deed restriction is 10 years, we only serve one family. if we move it, let's just say to 30 years, which is say, in congruence with Habitat, we'll have 3 families potentially. And if somebody says, you know what, this is a good deal, I don't want to leave, then they just stay. But potentially we can get 3 families if we move it beyond 10 years. And going, say, to 30 rather than perpetuity, it affects lending differently too. So like what I talked about earlier about perpetuity would really shrink the lending portion of it, even if we just moved it to, I don't know, say from 10 to 20. We could potentially maybe have 2 families. But again, it does kick back into, at least with the recapture part, would be kicking it back in. So thank you, Ms. Cochran.
Thank you.
Chair, the next testifier is Tom Blackburn Rodriguez, testifying on HHT 27, followed by Bruce Uu.
Chair, thank you very much. It is really a pleasure to be in this hall and be talking about affordable housing. It's so difficult and nobody has walked away from it. So it's an honor to be here and to continue to push forward on this issue. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair Crivello and committee members, and Merry Christmas to everybody. My name is Tom Blackburn Rodriguez. I'm a resident of Kihei. I'm testifying on behalf of Go Maui on HHT 27. Go Maui cannot support the proposed bill, which has many problems, including the mistaken assumption that a one-size-fits-all approach will work in the development of affordable housing, and that the one size will be a government regulation or demand and not an option as it is now. The bill attempts and fails to build on the work of the community and previous councils by mistakenly appropriating perpetuity language within Chapter 3.35 Affordable Housing Fund. The bill ignores the clear language of 3.35010, or purpose, which lays out in detail what activities may be funded by the Affordable Housing Fund and is referred to several times in different sections of the Affordable Housing Fund, establishing a dominant clause in the legislation that subordinate clauses, such as the language in 3.35060, criteria for selection of grant or loan proposals, must be guided by. Yet even there, the number one selection criteria listed are the requirements laid out in section 3.35010, as previously mentioned. I can tell you that the phrase nonprofit or community land trust that is in the housing fund legislation is not there by accident. For example, selection criteria B-3 of 3.35060 was designed to provide an option for funding community land trust proposals at a time when a CLT was a new, unknown, and untested idea on Maui, and for that matter, in Hawaii. The language provided a way for in perpetuity proposals to be considered and was put in as a funding option, not as a mandate. There is nothing in the Affordable Housing Fund legislation that mandates each and every selection criteria must be applied to each and every proposed project. That would be in direct conflict with the overriding language of 3.35010 purpose and would not be practical in the real world given the diversity of the housing populations in need and the organizations that have evolved. This is an ambitious and overly reaching piece of legislation that does not deliver and may be more of a housing Trojan horse than the salvation it purports to be. I respectfully request that the legislation not move forward. Aloha.
Mahalo. Members, any clarification for the testifier? Thank you for being here.
Thank you and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Chair, the next testifier is Bruce Uu, testifying on HHT 27, followed by Autumn Ness.
Aloha, everyone. Happy holidays, Chair, Council. My name is Bruce Uu. I am a carpenter by trade. I work for the Carpenters Union. Also, I previously sat on the Haleo Maui as vice president. I maxed out my 8 years there. Also, I was with Charlie Jenks prior to amend the bill to where it is now, the affordable housing bill. The difference I have with many people testifying in front of you, in which I agree on the most part that I oppose what's being asked, is that I was raised in low-income housing. And, you know, great. It's great, and there was no deed restrictions. Absolutely none. So the myth where people reselling Yeah, I like to see who's reselling those, and for the most part in my neighborhood, I can list at least 15 people still in there. And by the way, my house, the affordable housing that I currently live in was, I think Elmer Carvalho at the time was the mayor, and was my mom's house, and it got bequeathed to me, and with the equity that I got out of the house, which I currently have, we bought a lot. What Tom Cook talked about. And we bought a lot, and we're going to build eventually. That is truly affordable. I'd say right off the bat, we get Lanzagas, Manuels, Dizons, Pelazars, Kusanokis, Kagasan, Kaulas, Nikaidos, Demelos, Ruiz, Sabalons, Ridleys, De Los Santos, Pioneros, Felicianos, Montavos, and the Toros, all in my neighborhood with 0 deed restrictions that are truly affordable in perpetuity. They handed them down to my kids. And I intend to do the same thing, and that is the goal. And so we're all on the same page, and we all talking the same lingo as far as, but to put the deed restrictions on something that's quite possibly happening right now. I like that buyback, so you stop speculators from flipping homes, and that was probably a problem. That's why I got bought up years ago. I think we need Nahali and the nonprofits to take over after that 20-year buyback comes into play, where there's an entity that receives the house. I agree that in perpetuity works. Again, Nahali o Maui. I agree that rental works too, and that's part of the solution for the affordable housing. The rental part might be big because it's what we need too. So, inside perspective on how it works, low income. The only thing they will look down on you, people look down on you when you're low income. And that's why I love Nahali Maui. My father-in-law looked at me and he said, "Where are you from?" Paia. What neighborhood? Halenani. He already had the assumption that, oh, you're going to date my daughter. Guess what? I marry him. We win. All right. Aloha.
Thank you. Any clarification or questions? Yes.
Chair, the next testifier is Autumn Ness, testifying on HHT 27, followed by Albert Perez.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Autumn Ness. This is a big topic that I have a lot to say, but I'll try and squeeze it in. First of all, the concept of long-term affordability is something that I think we really need to secure in some way, shape, or form. I'm not really married to the formula in front of us, but we need to do it in some way, shape, or form. I've spent the last few years working with Councilmember Cochran, talking at a lot of other jurisdictions that have pulled themselves out of similar crises, and everyone that I've talked to is making it work, and they think that we're crazy for dumping our affordable housing fund, which is taxpayer dollars, into subsidizing short-term solutions that will serve only one homeowner. More so, the jurisdictions who have heavy resort, second home, or retirement populations find this to be even more important. In our own Affordable Housing Fund section of the code, it says that a project must demonstrate that it directly advances the objective of providing affordable housing in perpetuity as one of the 3 criteria for selection. We've been giving out grants that don't satisfy this criteria. In the last Affordable Housing Fund grant process, a few of the members tried to require that these projects be affordable in perpetuity, and their request failed, even though it goes against the code. And that happens every single time a grant is given. This concept is brought up during 201H discussions as well, but there are too many questions about the logistics to be able to apply it in those deliberations. I really feel a sense of urgency around this particular concept, that it be passed before other housing solutions are presented. And the misconception that this is about 2.96, I'd like to kind of fix this. For me, this isn't about 2.96. 2.96 is broken. Nothing's being built under 2.96, but 2.96 is the reference point with which this body and our departments start everything else. They start our 201H discussions from our 2.96 language. We talk about funding county-funded offsite infrastructure projects that are going to fund affordable housing projects, and all of that centers around 2.96. So if we don't discuss the legal shape of 2.96 now, every other solution we put forward from now on is going to be a short-term one and not a long-term one. You know, we have these goals to build 1,400 units a year for 10 years, which I think are lofty. Even if we did, when those things flip to market prices, then what? That's more homes for mainland retirees And our grandkids are going to be standing in the same spot, having the same conversation with way less buildable land to deal with. So I feel like whatever we do, if we're going to build, we have to make sure that there are long-term solutions for your guys' kids and my kids too. Again, I'm not married to the formula in this bill. We've been working on this bill for a year plus, and I'd be happy to explain why this formula is what we chose. But I love Lawrence Carnicelli's idea. There are a lot of formulas that work. As long as the body figures out one that they like, I think it'll serve the community really well.
Thank you. Any questions or clarification for the testifier, members? Mr. White, your light is on? No? Okay. Ms. Cochran?
Chair, if you don't mind, I meant to ask when Mr. Carnicelli was up testifying, if he's able and if you're willing, if he could be here as a resource along with Ms. Ness, if it's...
If there are no objections from the members, I'll ask them to be available if they're willing. Yeah. All right.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair, the next testifier is Albert Perez, testifying on HHT 32 and HHT 27, followed by Adrian Raff Corwin.
Good afternoon, Chair, Council members. Mele Kalikimaka to everybody. I'll go with HHT 32 first. Maui Tomorrow. I'm Albert. I'm director of the Maui Tomorrow Foundation. We support this proposed resolution. We've been working with Face Maui for a long time, and we're looking to try to find real solutions. We have developers, we have real estate people. We're looking for real solutions. We brought over developers from Oahu. There are options that are out there that are working, and I think that similar to what I think Mr. Carnicelli said, I think the problem with the structure of the Department of Housing and Human Concerns is that the human concerns are more immediate, and they're in our face. We're dealing with homelessness and things like that. The housing is more in the future, so I think that and I'm not in the Department of Housing and Human Concerns, but it's my sense that they don't get to focus as much as they would like to on housing. So I'd like to see that separated. And I think that that would be one of the effects of this hopefully nonpartisan position that's going to be hired. We need more focus on this housing problem. I also recommend, attended the Hawaii Conference of Planning Officials, and there was a presentation by their housing director, Kanani Fu, I think is her name. They had a lot of good ideas. So I recommend that the council look at some of those things that they're doing in Kauai that I understand are pretty successful. And I'll move on to HHT 27. We definitely support the proposed ordinance, at least in some form. Currently, we have what I would call a leaky workforce housing system. So homes that are sold under these restrictions go back to being unaffordable after just a few years. We are not making progress. The proposed shared appreciation mechanism gives homeowners a chance to build some equity while ensuring that their affordable units will remain affordable if and when they have a chance to move up the ladder. So what's the choice? I mean, either we do something like this or people are not going to be able to buy a home. That's what's happening right now. So at least they'll have a place to live rather than having to leave Hawaii, and they can work on going to the market if they can swing that. I believe that, and this is what we've been trying to do in FACE, I believe that government and developers, material suppliers, unions, and nonprofits, as well as prospective owners, need to work together to create workforce housing that will remain affordable in perpetuity. So let's look for things that we can help. You know, maybe the unions can lower their rate on an affordable housing project. Maybe the material suppliers can make a little less profit. Maybe if the developer has more certainty on a particular project, they'll be willing to accept less profit in exchange for that lowered risk. we need to all work together. Market housing is not affordable to working families, and half of it ends up being sold to out-of-state buyers. We cannot build our way out of this problem. We are a small county. We do not have enough land to just build our way when most of this stuff is getting sold out of state. Or we're going to end up like Oahu. That is our choice. And while I'm at it, I would like to, well, I'll just continue with my testimony. Some concern has been raised about takings, but this is a real stretch. If there were a real problem, it would have been raised with regard to the existing restrictions. So I don't think that holds any water. We're in a housing emergency, and government does indeed have a rational nexus, a crying public need for housing that supports this type of requirement. So please don't be swayed by such arguments. Finally, I just want to say that it gets really tiresome hearing people blame our workforce housing ordinance for the lack of development during the Great Recession, as if that had nothing to do with it. It also is really tiresome to hear people criticizing the Show Me the Water ordinance as if developers should be allowed to build housing that doesn't have a water supply. That's crazy. It's not sustainable. Anyway, we urge you to pass this ordinance and give local families a chance. Mahalo.
Thank you. Members, any clarification? Councilmember King?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here, Mr. Perez, and for your testimony on affordable housing. I just wanted to clarify your testimony on HHT 32 on the resolution, and we have a resolution that really the only action is that in it is to authorize the council chair to contract for affordable housing policy and implementation analysis. But in the description, in the committee chair's description, there's a more detailed description of what that would authorize. So I just wondered if you support. It looks like it says authorizing the council chair to contract for an affordable housing policy and implementation analysis. The purpose of the proposed resolution is to authorize the council chair to contract for an affordable housing policy and implementation analysis to identify current obstacles, implement policy changes, reduce barriers, and create incentives to effectively address the shortage of affordable housing in Maui County.
So address that.
Yeah, I just wondered if you felt that that is a, that's encompassing what you're advocating for.
Not exactly. I feel like we need a point person on this. We need some person to be an advocate for truly affordable housing for working families. So an analysis sounds like a study to me, and I don't know who's going to do that based on the wording of the resolution. I don't know what the result would be. What we need is to use that money to get somebody to push the issue and find out where the real problems are and find some solutions.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to clarify if you were supporting the earlier idea that was brought up by Mr. Franco of creating a multi-stakeholder group to, I think it's basically to kind of determine the scope and the work that would be done and the deliverables that would be that we're looking for in this contract, as well as the qualifications for the person that we're contracting with.
Yes, we definitely support Mr. Franco's proposal.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Chair, the next testifier is Adrian Raff Corwin, followed by Lucien Dene.
Aloha, Council. I had signed up just to testify on 32, but I was hoping to testify on both 32 and 27.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Adrienne Raff Corwin, and I'm the coordinator for Sierra Club Maui Group, and I'm testifying on behalf of Sierra Club Maui today. Regarding 32, item 32, I just want to voice my support and the club's support for Stan Franco's testimony. We really liked his original proposal submitted by Face Maui and others for what this housing advocate would do. I believe there were 4 specific tasks laid in that proposal, and that again, that person would be hired based on a committee of people who are experts on this issue. I think that
with this housing advocate position, one of the most important things is this person, to do a really good job on this work, is going to have to talk to the people that actually know about this issue, which are all of these people in Nahalio Maui, Habitat for Humanity, Lakahi Pacific, etc. So it's great if those people can help hire this person, and then they already know what this person's strengths and weaknesses are, how they can help that person, and that person will have an even easier job of getting this job done. So again, we very much support Stan Franco's proposal, and we hope that you will consider making sure that a full committee of experts on affordable housing help hire this person. I'd like to move on to the next item. Sierra Club Maui does not have a position on this item. I'm just wanting to make that very clear. But I just wanted to mention that I noticed in some of the testimony submitted that one of the reasons against, submitted by A&B, against having any sort of in perpetuity or longer stretch of time was this idea of moving up the housing ladder, right? And that if you cannot sell your house for a longer period of time. We at Sierra Club Maui, along with Face Maui and others, we started the Hukilike no Maui Coalition, which is all about looking at solutions for agriculture, affordable housing, and conservation on this island. And one of the things we did was we did a housing survey for the community. And we got about 450 people responding to that survey. The majority of people in that survey, when they commented, they were having a hard time finding housing. They were talking about stress about being homeless, right? You're basically talking about people that are at the very edge of their tether. Those people would love to buy these houses. Now, a house that's affordable in perpetuity or affordable for 50 years or 30 years, whatever might be decided, there's lots of people on this island who are struggling, but they know they want this island to be their home. They're not interested in going up the housing ladder to go from, you know, a 2-3 bedroom or a really nice apartment to condo something to a fancy mansion. That's not what they're looking for. I don't want to speak for everyone, but definitely the people that responded to our survey, they're looking for something that's safe, where they can go to sleep at night. They know their kids are not going to be homeless next year. They want something they can own and be safe in. And they want to live on Maui for their whole life. I would like everyone to keep those people in your mind when we're talking about this and finding solutions, because those are the really people that need this. And so I just wanted to say that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, any clarification or questions for the testifier? There be none, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, the next testifier is Lucienne Dene, testifying on HHT 32 and HHT 27.
Aloha, Committee Chair Crivello and committee members. My name is Lucienne Dene. I'm testifying as a private individual today. And Merry Christmas to all. I'll be testifying on both items on the agenda. I guess I'll start out with HHT 32. And I agree with those who came before that if we're going to be going forward on how to use this funding to actually create something of worth to our affordable housing situation here, we do need this review committee that is qualified to give their advice. I know the Face Maui, in working to come up with language about this proposal, has reached out to all kinds of people from, you know, the realty side of things, from the housing trust side of things, from the developer side of things, and gotten good ideas from all around. And this is why I think all of us who've worked through this process firmly believe that this is the kind of advice we need going forward, people who are on the ground making this happen. So I hope that that is added in if this measure is passed, that there is this review committee made up of qualified individuals. Also, I think the scope of the housing consultant's work needs to really be, you know, very, very clear for them. I know there's been different lists passed around of what they would tackle. But what we've heard again and again is we need to help on the permit side of things. And one suggestion is the one-stop county contact for affordable housing projects. And many communities have this. This is not a new idea. This is not a radical idea. This is an idea that works in a lot of places, including places that I've lived. And then to create this inventory of the lands that we have available to work with and look at our possibilities. So instead of like hoping someone comes up with the project somewhere, we're working towards identifiable goals. And then to recommend any changes to our laws that we need in order to expedite things. Now, you know, the TIG worked on this, but this is really important to kind of get down to the nitty and the gritty. And of course, to encourage any innovation in techniques and in ideas for financing and for building affordable housing, because we all know that building is one part and the financing is another part. So all of these need to be on that agenda, and I hope that you will make sure that they are. I'll move on to HHT 27. I think that what we all want to see is a way to end speculation in the pool of homes that should be affordable to our local residents. And how we get there, I think the ideas are still coming. I too thought that Mr. Carnicelli's ideas and the ideas that were contributed by Doug Spencer bear merit to putting into this process. But the idea of just saying, oh, well, neighborhoods were built before and people don't move from them, I've heard that a lot, but there's plenty of neighborhoods that were built before and people do move from them and sell their homes to people from the mainland who then, they're no longer affordable homes, and they go up and up and up in price. And so you go through Haiku and you see a lot of places like this. It's great when families can hang on to their homes, but not everybody can for a variety of reasons. So we need to have something that recognizes we do not have a normal housing market here. We have a housing market that, we had a normal housing market maybe in the 70s when I first came, but no more. It's really, really influenced by the fact that we're a desirable location for mainland buyers. And it's just a fact of life. And when I served on GPAC, our planning department recognized it as a fact of life. They showed us charts of the mainland demand in each of the community planning districts, and they said, we got to work with this somehow because the offshore demand is huge here. So we need something to make it that there are incentives for longer-term affordability that still allows people, if they are going to sell at some point, to make a fair profit, or that money, I like the idea of the money going back in the Affordable Housing Fund if that fund is well managed and well directed. So thank you for your considerations on these two important matters, and have a Merry Christmas, and everyone deserves some rest for the holidays. Aloha.
Thank you. Members, any questions or clarifications for the testifier? If none, thank you. Merry Christmas.
Chair, there is no one else waiting to testify.
So do we have anyone in the gallery? I believe we have one. You may come down and testify and fill out the form as required. Identify yourself, please.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Peter Martin. My thoughts were a lot, and I wasn't planning to testify, but I thought about the law of unintended consequences. I wanted to say I'm a little qualified to teach or to speak about this. We did involved in the 68 homes in Kahoma residential last year, and Hope Builders, the company I'm partners with Maggie Klum, we did build 25 of them, and now we're in the process of building 33 more in Puella. And I'm also trying hard to get a number of 201H projects through. Please ask for my thoughts on solution after I go over this little math experiment. I hope you all have page 3 here of the bill. And I did this math. Some of you knew you don't have to be a math teacher, but I was for Baldwin and Maui High, as I've said before. So you take line 1 and just write in a pretend number, 600,000 for the house. Some of our houses, this is a good example. And they did appraise at around 800,000. This is just within the last month. Now you take line 3. That's the subsidy. That's the ratio of 1 to 2. That's 75%. Next, this has to do with, let's say you wait, in my example, you're going to wait 36 years before you sell. I use 36 years because of the rule of 72, and I assumed 4% appreciation. 4% appreciation means that house will double in value every 18 years. That's the rule of 72, and you could also do it on a calculator. You can just do it in your head, and that means in 36 years, the house would be worth $3.2 million. I believe that's the line with my glasses that you have to have for line 4. Then line 5, the difference between those two lines is the appreciation, $2.4 million. Now you take line 6, multiply line 3 by line 5. Oh, shoot. I'm almost done. Let me just continue. If you do this, the seller, when he sells his house after 36 years, could get $1 million. All that he would be allowed to keep is $1,275,000. His house is worth $3.2 million. You think that the guy is just going to let you get that money? Think about this for a little bit.
Thank you. Members, Ms. Cochran.
Aloha, Pete. Nice to see you.
Yes.
So
Hope you didn't
was
do
that
the math wrong, by the way?
No, I'm not going to try
I
and
did it
cross-check
quick.
your math, but just so your example, was that initial 600,000 subsidized by the Affordable Housing Fund?
You might call it subsidized. I just saying the houses that we sold for 600 appraised at 8. By the way, you should know this. It was fascinating to watch the appraisals. Some were at 929, some were at 7. Same house, but I used 800 for an example. So if you wanted to call that a subsidy, I don't call it a subsidy, but whatever. 600, yes, that's the example.
Thank you. I'm sorry, can you identify yourself?
Oh, I'm Peter Martin, or Pete.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Okay.
Thank you. So are there anyone else in the gallery? Thank you. Please come forward. And then you may fill out the form after your testimony. Thank you.
As Mele Kalikimaka Yako. My name is Tasha Kama, and I'm just speaking just because I feel so excited about being in this place. This is a place of power. This is a place where we come and we share what's in our hearts and what's in our heads, and we expect you to do great, mighty miracles. I just wanted to come up and tell you all, thank you for all that you've done. And I'm thinking that this is probably going to be my last testimony before you all, before the new year. But I want you to remember, local people, the intent in buying a house is to live there for generations to come. We don't care what's going to be worth in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. We just want to make sure our mo'opuna and the descendants for 7 generations to come will still be there in that house that we buy. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other testifiers in the gallery that wishes to come forward? Have we heard from the districts? Are there any notification of testifiers? There be none. If there are no objections, members, I'd like to close testimony. Thank you. So I'm going to ask that we take a brief recess. And I'm hoping all of you at least will be able to stay here at least maybe about another hour or hour and a half. It depends how we move along. We have just 2 items, but we do have a resource panel that will talk about the HHT 27, if we can all be available. So we'll come back at about 4:05, if that's okay with the members. Just to me. Thank you, members. The Housing, Human Services, and Transportation Committee will now reconvene our meeting. So, members, our agenda item, HH2-32, Affordable Housing Policy and Implementation Analysis. The committee is in receipt of the following: County Communications 17-448, from myself, Councilmember Stacy Crivello, relating to the Council's appropriation of $250,000 for an affordable housing policy and implementation analysis. Correspondence dated November 21, 2017, from the Department of the Corporation Counsel, transmitting a proposed resolution entitled, Authorizing the Council Chair to Contract for an Affordable Housing Policy and Implementation Analysis. The purpose of the proposed resolution is to authorize the Council Chair to contract for an affordable housing policy and implementation analysis to identify current obstacles, implement policy changes, reduce barriers, and create incentives to effectively address the shortage of affordable housing in Maui County. The committee may consider whether to recommend adoption of the proposed resolution with or without revisions. The committee may also consider the filing of County Communication 17-448 and other related action. So, members, this past budget session, the Council appropriated $250,000 in the Council Services Program fiscal year 2018 budget to be used for an affordable housing policy and implementation analysis. It is the Chair's understanding for Council to consider outsourcing for either a consultant or entity to perform an analysis and create a strategic roadmap for current and long-term planning of building of affordable homes that will help the county address and meet its demands. We all know about the recent study that we're looking at affordable housing by the year of 2025 should equate to about 1,400 units per year. Although the number of units are increasing, we are still not building enough houses quickly enough to keep up with demand, and there is no real long-term plan to address this. Members, you may have what staff has distributed, a handout with the proposed scope and overall objective of work for this effort. It is my intent as chair today is to move forward with a proposed resolution authorizing our council chair to contract for an affordable housing policy and implementation analysis consistent with the intent of the appropriation. So the resolution, once the resolution is approved by council, as revised by Corporation Council, to incorporate a change to Charter Section 8-10.3 in the second whereas clause, And then once the resolution is approved by council, we will move forward with the request for proposals process. I will not be filing the communication in order for committee discussion to resume once the RFP process is complete. So that being said, members, you have your handouts. Do you have your handouts? Yeah. Okay. So at this time, I'd like to open the floor for discussion and questions and comments and what have you. I'll start from Ms. King. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this forward. I think this is a really important step, and we had a lot of discussion about it in budget, so I won't belabor that. But I would like to propose a third whereas that would be actually number 2 after the first whereas, or I'm sorry, not whereas, under the resolved, be it resolved. And I don't know if it's appropriate time to bring that up right now or wait till there's a motion.
I'll park it for now until we further discussion.
Okay, I just want to, let me just, yeah, I just want to say that I think we need a little bit more parameters on it, and so that's what my proposal
Okay, so what, I'm sorry, what whereas were you referring to?
It's not the whereas, I'm sorry, it's under the be it resolved. So it would be after the first, after number 1 and before number 2.
Okay, I'll come back to you on that.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm going down the line. Mr. Goose?
Sorry, Chair, I have a candy cane in my mouth.
That's okay, it's Christmas,
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, I think, okay. On the RFP process, do we need to, I know we usually indicate the scope of what we're requiring. Are we
Yes.
going to just take the whereases and then craft that into the RFP?
I think you have a handout also with the briefing of the objective and the scope that the RFP has not been worked on, and that's not to be made public because it's out for bid. But that's the conceptual plan for us. So not necessarily fitting in all the whereases for this.
Okay, so
the intent of this reso is to draw down.
Yeah. I get that, but then at some point, do we need directions within the be it resolved to limit the scope of what we're...
I think you're coming from where, I'll come back to that.
Oh,
when
okay.
You want to add
No, I just was
further,
asking the
if you want to
question.
expand it.
I was just asking the question as to whether, I know what the resolution is for, is to authorize us to draw down on the 250,000 within the OCS account.
Right.
But then at some point we need directions as to when we do select, or when the chair does select via the RFP, what is the scope of I mean, what are we asking the requirements to be, or what is the scope of employment? I guess that's in simple words. And so, do we need to put that down in the be it resolved area, or is that just going to be handled internally by
I
Chair
believe
White?
that would be handled internally.
Okay.
Ms. Cochran, I'll come back to you. Mr. Atai?
Thank you, Chair. I'm in full support of this resolution, and I'm also in hand have this sheet that says proposal to use the 250,000, has objective and has about 7 bullet pointed scopes, and I'm full support to have all of these things done. So does this get incorporated into this?
That was part of the RFP.
Okay.
Yeah.
But just get her done.
Okay, thank you. Mr. White?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this objective and scope document. I'm open to whatever assistance I can get, and I would be happy to involve, as suggested, some folks from the community that sees this challenge from the builder side, from the financial side, and so forth. So I think what I would like to do once this is passed, is to bring them together and get a sense from the folks whose feet are on the ground, whether this should all go to one entity or whether it should be parceled out to several people within various disciplines within the community that gets things done and also is responsible for passing laws. Because I think the challenge that we all have is that we have some laws at the state level that impact the timeliness and the way in which projects move forward, like the 201H. We have the county ordinances, we have the charter, we have a variety of different roadblocks, if you want to call them that, and I think it's probably appropriate to call them roadblocks. We also have financial roadblocks, so I would like to get a solid sense from the folks that do this a lot more than I do. What's the most effective way to utilize these funds? And it may be to put it with one entity or one person, but my sense is that before we do that, we should evaluate whether parceling it out into various disciplines may be a better way to approach it.
Do you see, with your comments, do you see some sort of amendment or addition to the be it resolved, number one, to add some source of
I'm open to that. I don't have a problem with that. As I said, I'm looking for whatever help I can get.
Right. Okay, thank you. Mr. Carroll?
I support.
Thank you. Ms. Cochran?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was first following your the handout, the objective and scope, and then the bill itself and the whereases were brought up. So were you focusing on one or the other, or just general comments right now?
I think just general comments. First of all, the resolution is to allow us to request the drawdown of the funding. And the other handout is what staff has been working on for quite some time through all of their interviews and research and the work that they've been doing, how we've sort of have a brief idea or a concept of what the scopes are and the objective. And then from that, they will, once the drawdown, they'll be working on the RFPs to be able to solicit what kind of support we'll need.
Okay, and so I guess am I to understand then our chair will be in charge of choosing who this person is?
Actually, when we approved the budget, that was included in the appropriations. But after having further discussion, and I think the chair had mentioned he's open to add, I'm sure we've heard the testimony today, but how we will address it is, I'm here before committee if you have any suggestions on how you want to do that.
Sure.
Or if you want to do it, yeah.
Okay,
I'm
thank
open
you.
to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe I could just add my proposal and just because everybody's talking about it. So this would go under the be it resolved after number 1. It would say, and number 2, that the chair will convene a stakeholder meeting to recommend the scope of work, and deliverables for the contract, comma, and qualifications for potential consultants. And then the semicolon and the and then number 2 would become number 3. So that would include that intent.
Okay, staff, would you like to read it back? Do you have it together?
Can you repeat it one more time, please?
Okay.
And can you kind of submit that to staff?
Okay. I don't know if you can read my handwriting because he couldn't read it, but I'm happy to meet with you. But sorry. And okay, so the wording would be and then number 2 would start that the chair will convene a stakeholder meeting to recommend the scope of work, comma, deliverables for the contract, comma, and qualifications for potential consultants, semicolon, and. So that would be the number 2, and then what's right now number 2 would become number 3.
Right.
Is that, do you
Mr.
need
White?
me-
Yeah, I will get back to that.
Yeah, I would
Is
just ask to have an S put on consultant. 'Cause
Oh,
it could be either
consult-
consultant or consultants.
Okay, we could put an S in parentheses, and maybe it'll be 1, maybe it'll be more.
Fine.
Yeah. Okay. You got that, Steph? Okay. Would you like to, so this would come in as an addition amendment to this resolution. Staff, would you like to read it again so that we all on the same page?
Sorry, could you please submit it in writing and I'll write it down really quickly and read it back?
Okay, we want to take a quick break? or-
Okay. Recess at the call of the chair. Consider reading the suggested amendment.
Chair, the suggested amendment creates number 2, which reads that the chair will convene a stakeholder meeting, comma, to recommend the scope of work, comma, deliverables for the contract, comma, and qualifications for potential consultant, parentheses, S, parentheses, semicolon, and.
Okay, the only thing is there's no comma after the word recommend.
I'll read, do you want me to read it again?
I think you had a comma in there,
Okay. We'll delete the comma.
the first one.
Right.
After recommend.
Just the first comma.
So read again.
Is that the completion of it?
Yes.
Okay. All right, members, any further comments or further discussion on this resolution? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion to pass this resolution that's before you with the amendment that was that's added on to this.
So moved.
Okay. There's a motion to move and second. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Thank you. So we have a passage of this resolution with motion by those approving Councilmember King, Councilmember Guzman, Councilmember Atai, Chair White, Councilmember Carroll, and myself, and excuse is Mr. Hokama. Thank you. Motion passed. So we move on to our next item, HHT-27, amendments to the residential workforce. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Yeah. My apologies. So we've authorizing the council chair to contract for an affordable housing policy and with the amendments, and the motion passes. So with HH 227, amendments to the residential housing workforce housing policy and affordable housing fund.
Thanks.
You have, do all of you have the bill before you? So the committee is in receipt of County Communication 17-434 from Councilmember Ellie Cochran, transmitting a proposed bill entitled A Bill for an Ordinance amending Chapters 2.96 and 3.35 Maui County Code relating to the residential workforce housing policy and affordable housing fund. The purpose of the proposed bill is to require that housing provided pursuant to the workforce housing policy or with affordable housing fund money is kept affordable in perpetuity through deed restrictions. The committee may discuss the matter. There is No legislative action will be taken. So members, it is the chair's intent to entertain discussion on the proposed bill as it amends Chapter 2.96, 3.35 of the Maui County Code. And again, no legislative action will be taken. Today, we are joined at this late hour by a panel of 3 affordable housing developers who possess experience building homes on Maui and who will share their thoughts on the proposed bill. We'll take a brief recess, real brief, so don't leave so that our resource panel people can come forward. Thank you. We're back to reconvene. So I'd like to introduce Executive Director from Nahaleo Maui, Cassandra Abdul. Thank you for being here. Executive Director, Habitat for Humanity, and Susie Thiemann, Executive Director for Lokahi Pacific. I would like to start with opening comments from the department. And I believe staff is distributing a handout from the department relating to affordable housing projects. So at this time, we'll open up comments from Director Reinman.
Aloha Chair, aloha members. Before we comment on the draft bill, we think it's important to give you some historical and statistical content. The original Workforce Housing Ordinance was passed in 2006. And between 2006 and 2014, there was only 1 workforce housing agreement that was executed and 3 workforce units generated. Seeing the lack of production, HHT spent 14 months from November of 2013 until December of 2014 reviewing 2.96 in order to jumpstart development. This included the formation of a task force at the committee's request of Maui housing experts to evaluate the bill and make proposed changes. The task force's proposed changes were adopted or approved by HHT committee in December of 2014 with the approach of let's see how these changes affect production. With regards to the deed restrictions, Council reduced the affordability periods as follows. For the for sale projects, the deed restriction period was reduced from 25 years to 5 to 10 years. For the rental projects, the deed restriction was reduced from in perpetuity to 30 years. The logic behind supporting this is because in generally the life of a building is roughly 30 years by appraisal standards. The task force felt it was good to release the restrictions before major renovations would be required. A couple of bullet points. In regard to residential workforce housing agreements, there was only 1 workforce housing agreement executed from the inception of 2.96 in December of 2006 through the end of 2014. Since the amendments were made, 10 agreements under 2.96 have been executed and recorded with the Bureau of Conveyances over the past 3 years, and a total of 17 agreements altogether if we include 201H and other projects. In regard to housing constructed under 2.96, we now have 485 workforce housing units and 561 market units under active construction since the changes to 2.96 were adopted. A total of 1,046 units are being built today. From 2006 to 2014, there were 12 total units. At this time, I'd like to draw your attention to your handout, the grid that we passed out. This spreadsheet is our updated affordable housing project status update that we revise every 6 months. This document will be officially transmitted to HHT next week, so we're not prepared to discuss all of the projects individually, but we thought that the spreadsheet would give you an advanced viewing to illustrate the housing projects that have been generated after 2.96 changes were made in 2014. They are highlighted in pink. There are 10 pink highlighted projects some currently under construction and some pending, representing 486 workforce and 577 market units for a total of 1,063 units. And when we think of where we were between 2006 to 2014 with 3 workforce housing units to today where we have 486 workforce housing units, what you see today is a 16,000% increase in workforce housing units. 16,000% increase. The bottom line is that since we amended Chapter 2.96 and lessened the restrictions in the ordinance, we have seen a spike in housing projects moving forward and becoming reality. We would like to stress that all housing developments take time and money, and that more projects continue to move closer to fruition because of the changes that were adopted. The department feels if the committee adopts restrictive changes proposed by this bill, that Maui County will regress to the levels seen prior to 2014. We recommend keeping the existing policy in place and give it a little more time to flourish. Our general concerns to the bill are as follows. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. I think we've heard that from many of the testifiers. Affordable in perpetuity has its place in the market, yes. Therefore, the department feels that this approach should be a niche product only, not a blanket policy for all projects in Maui County. Lenders have informed the department that financing perpetuity is difficult, and although there may be options available for perpetuity, they are generally more restrictive with higher interest rates and higher down payment requirements, which would make it difficult for lower income families to qualify and afford. The bill's buyback formula is very confusing and cumbersome. It would be extremely difficult to explain these formulas to first-time homebuyers. Monitoring the projects in perpetuity is also a concern. Over time, it would require an increase in staffing to handle the amount of units being monitored, as monitoring requirements will also be in perpetuity. Lastly, we caution changing the Affordable Housing Fund to only allow projects that are affordable in perpetuity to receive funding. If this were the case, Nahale would be the only entity that would qualify, and we have heard what they have to say about that. Thank you for the opportunity to make some comments, and we're here to answer any questions. Mahalo.
Thank you, Director. I'd also like to just recognize that we have other resource persons in the gallery. We have Lawrence Carnicelli. Thank you for being here, and Autumn Ness. Thank you for being here. So I also, at this time, we have from Corporation Counsel, Deputy Jeff Ueoka, if you have some brief comments to prep before us.
Thank you, Chair. Did you want me to go through the bill briefly?
Yes.
Thank you. The first section of the bill worked with Councilmember Cochran's office on this. It adds in definitions under 2.96020 for beneficiary, heirs, and successors. That's primarily to see who can take over the property without running afoul of the restrictions. The next section, in 2.96040A, there's a deletion in the middle, which was, I guess, rendered unnecessary because everything would be into income qualified groups in perpetuity now. Currently in the bill, this is the Nahale portion where you would only owe 20% instead of 25% if you worked with Nahale on satisfying your residential workforce housing requirement. On the next page, it goes into B. On the top, all it does is delete out the 10.85 restriction period and puts in the language for perpetuity. The bottom of page F, resale under 2.96060 B2. It basically says maximum resale price preserves the affordability of the property for future income qualified people and takes into account the investment by the property owner. And then it goes through the formula. I can read the formula, but essentially it creates a percentage, which is the subsidy ratio, and then you get multiplied by the more years you live there, the higher percentage of that subsidy you get when you sell it. I'm probably not doing it justice by explaining it briefly, but I know we're pressed for time here. The next section goes into, on page 4, goes into the improvement types that could be added to the resale value so the owner could recover the cost of capital improvements. So there's a laundry list, so you can read that more carefully. The next section, G at the bottom, talks about the transfer of the property only to the property owners, beneficiaries, successor, the county's assignee, or an income qualified person. So meaning a future purchaser would need to be income qualified also. It goes into the process for the sale. And finally, at the end, it discusses if the property is foreclosed on, the deed restrictions set forth in this section shall not apply. So that should be helpful moving forward. On the page 6, it goes into the requirements under 3.35060. Under the grant or loan proposal shall meet the criteria for approval, which talks about remaining affordable in perpetuity. Moving forward, if you guys are going to push this, I believe further amendments to chapter 3.35 need to be made to, or I shouldn't say further amendments because 2.96 will be changing, but there's currently a reference to 2.96 for the deed restriction, so that reference should carry through. I'm sorry about that, Chair. In a nutshell, that's the bill in front of you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll be opening up the floor for questions. So at this time, I'd like to call on our panels to share their thoughts. We may start however you decide to start from, ladies.
Does anybody have any idea how long perpetuity is? I think anytime I've asked that question, I've kind of gotten the same chuckle from people. It depends on how long you live, right? If this is your property. From our standpoint, we're more concerned about building more properties than the length of time that these properties remain affordable. While we'd like to see them stay affordable, it's not that, well, our new project, which we're having a formal blessing for on Monday, is 25 years. That was not an issue to any of the buyers. Our previous property in Kihei was 15 years. That was not an issue for anybody. Lahaina, before that, was 15 years, and they are just about 2 years away from coming up to the end of that. I'm concerned that we're thinking about the wrong end of the, well, is this the wrong end of the horse, so to speak? I would much rather see us spending time trying to figure out how to get projects moving. Once you have someone who wants to develop something and it's a good project, there are too many places where it falls through the cracks. We've had issues where paperwork has sat on people's desk while they went on a 3-week vacation. Doesn't get moved to somebody else to take care of or finish. We've had other paperwork that supposedly there was something wrong with it, but nobody ever wrote the memo to us to tell us. We had work added to our project. That was the water issue, the off-site water issue, which you're all very well aware of. That cost us almost a year's time in a 4-year process. So what we're doing on Monday could have been done a year ago if we had not been hit with that project and finding the funding to do that project. And again, I want to thank you all for coming through on that and getting that worked out, and especially Mr. Hokama for putting it in the budget when he did and getting the county water department to pay for that. That certainly was a big help in keeping the price affordable. I guess the bottom line to me is, why did we have that happen? And does that happen on very many projects where something is added that's just totally off the wall, drops out of the sky, whatever you want to call it, that ruins the affordability of a project to where people just say, oh, forget it. So like I say, I'm more concerned about the initial getting going on a project. We were ready to go within 8 months of getting the initial $2 million from the county. We had bought the property. We had all the consultants doing their work. We were on the ground doing things, and then we got stuck. And then we come down to the end of the project, and we still get stuck from time to time. I think we're now at a pretty good point. But it's like so many things where your attention is taken away from the project to the paperwork. The buyers, some of these buyers that we've got moving into these houses, we've been working with for 3 years to make sure they get their credit shaped up, that they understand what it's all about, that they have the money for their down payment, taking on extra jobs if it took that, whatever the case might be. You tend to lose sight of what you're doing this for or who you're doing it for when you end up working with paperwork. And it's all about the people, getting them in houses. None of these folks are buying these houses to resell them. That's the furthest thing from their mind. For most of them, it's a case where their parents never owned a home. This is their opportunity to have a steady home, a roof over the head for their children. Some of them have been in and out of homeless shelters. Some of them have been living in a one-room cottage on their uncle's farm for 10 years. One family even raised their whole family, and now they're finally getting a house. So the stories behind all these, to me, are so much more important and getting things happening for them than trying to put everything in one basket and saying, we're going to put it all in perpetuity. And as Lawrence Carnicelli was talking about, do the numbers on page 3. I did the numbers, and I did our numbers based on our residential workforce housing agreement. And at the end of 25 years, there's like $2,000 difference in what the buyer or the owner will get when they sell, if they sell. I mean, so the numbers, you can play them any way you want back and forth. It comes out the same. In some of our projects, we've had first-time home buyers assistance that we've been able to give our buyers. That puts us with a second lien on the property. That's the safest way to protect from people, the buyers or the owners, going out and refinancing, because as was cited on several occasions, the appraisals and the values are much higher than what we're charging for the houses. When they go out and they refinance to buy new toys, boats, SUVs, whatever the case might be, that's when they get in trouble. And the houses end up in foreclosure. They lose everything. But the next buyer doesn't have to live up to any of these restrictions. So it's going on the marketplace that way. And if you're sitting there looking at the whole picture, I think, again, I go back to the beginning where I say, I'd like to find a way to get through the process so you can get to building the houses quicker and work on that end. It appears to me that the new residential workforce housing agreements work as written.
Thank you. Cassandra? Nahali o Maui.
Thank you. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to all of you. I know this is a really, really tough problem. There are no easy answers. There's no answer that fits everything. And the community really appreciates the fact that you put in the hard work to try and improve it. And I think as you progress and we get more information, broader information, we'll end up with a better product in the long run. I noticed that Councilmember Cochran's bill, much of it reflects what Nahalio Maui does. But we realize we're really kind of a niche player. We're in between what the other nonprofits are doing, fee simple with a deed restriction, and rentals. So there's an in-between space. And it happens to work for ours. But the thing is that we sell our houses with a 99-year lease, and they can have an option for another 99 years. So really, that's just under 200 years. And part of that is tied into the rule against perpetuities. And I don't know if that's an issue that comes up if you put a permanent deed restriction on or not. The perpetuity part is the CLT, the Community Land Trust. We are going to be there forever. We own the land. The house is sold to our homeowners. And whenever they leave, the difference between Nahalio Maui's program and the conventional leasehold property is that when they do leave, they take money with them, where with a conventional lease, you pack up your bags, you move out, you get nothing. So for our program, it's worked. We've been able to demonstrate that with a few resales, and we've even helped our homeowners where we could not afford to buy back the home, selling it from one income-qualified family to another income-qualified family at a truly affordable price. The other part that's been mentioned is absolutely true. If property goes into foreclosure and the bank or anybody else buys it out of foreclosure, you lose the affordability. In our case, the only thing we could do would be to adjust the ground lease to what is a market rate. So because of that, we actually had a house go into foreclosure. The lender didn't let us know ahead of time. The homeowner didn't let us know ahead of time, so we were surprised when we got served. And what we did was we bought back the house. Why? Because we have to preserve the affordability. And actually to do it, we went into a credit line to be able to afford it. So now it's in escrow again to a qualified buyer. And across the nation in 2006, when the mortgage meltdown started, across the nation, all the CLTs, and there's probably 200 to 300 of them, 1% of their properties went into foreclosure. I think that's what Lawrence was talking about when he says you have to have stewardship. You have to have an entity that's going to be there for the long run. You can have a person, but all of our lives are finite. If you have a nonprofit organization that is going to be the steward, then you know that it will continue on beyond just one person. So I guess for our bottom line is we know that the more nonprofits and for-profit developers that are working to develop housing, the better off the community is. The way that the bill is currently drafted would benefit Nahalio disproportionately, but we understand that there's a bigger issue than our own self-interest, and that's the community itself. And we truly believe that with these three nonprofits, we can produce much more affordable housing than any one of us can by ourselves. And that's where our concern is. Again, totally get the good intentions. We just want to make sure that we know what the consequences are before we act, so we don't have unintended consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Sherry Dawson from
Aloha, I'm Sherry Dotson, Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity Maui. I'm also on the board of Hawaii Habitat, which represents all the affiliates in Hawaii, and I am a member of Housing Hawaii. I was a member of the original Maui Nui Housing Task Force. I was on the Governor's Task Force on Barriers to Affordable Housing, and I was on the task force to review Chapter 296 several years ago. I was born and raised in Hawaii, the daughter of a contractor who worked on Oahu and Maui, and have been working with Habitat for 15 years. In addition, I'm a licensed mortgage loan originator. The proposed amendment to the Residential Workforce Ordinance would eliminate funding to Habitat in its entirety because of our current deed restriction of 30 years. Habitat has built or renovated over 100 homes on Maui and Lanai and has plans to build 10 homes next year in Lahaina. Habitat believes that housing is essential to providing families with stability and strength. A house provides independence to a family, and deed restrictions, although necessary, should not act to reduce a family's feeling of independence and stability. A Habitat partner family must put in at least 500 hours of sweat equity. The sweat equity alone is worth at least $11,535. The community commits at least another 2,000 hours, totaling another $46,140. These are based on the determined value of volunteer labor. This is very unique to Habitat, and no other for-profit or nonprofit uses the community and the family as the main source of labor. In addition, Habitat issues the mortgage at a 0% interest rate. This saves a homeowner for a typical $400,000 home, 30-year mortgage at 3.5%, a total of $267,459 in interest payments. Habitat serves families that make 25 to 80% of median income. This income group would not qualify for a conventional loan and are typically living paycheck to paycheck. This income group has typically been marginalized because they live in low-income housing, live paycheck to paycheck, and are assumed to not be hard workers. The truth is that these are hardworking families that want the same things as anyone else, stability and security of owning their own home. When they finally realize the dream of homeownership, that becomes their sole source of wealth. They don't have savings accounts, retirements, or pensions, or any other large asset. All of the homes that Habitat has built, all of them, have remained in the hands of the original owner, except those that have been passed on to their families. The truth is, I wouldn't own my own home unless I had one passed down from my mom. It is Habitat's opinion that a 30-year deed restriction is adequate to assure that the home will not be flipped. The owner-occupied and right of first refusal clauses are additional assurances that the families will remain in the house. The restriction also includes any refinance of the house. Even to pull money out of the house, the family must first consult with Habitat, and Habitat ultimately has the say if they can refinance. Typically, we would deny it and try to work with them in a savings program for whatever they're hoping to use the money for. It should be the goal of the council and for everyone to increase the pool of affordable housing, not eliminate funding for any of the players. Thank you.
Thank you, panel. Thank you, ladies. This time, I'd like to open the floor for questions, comments, or discussion. And I'm going to start with Councilmember King because she's scheduled to leave in a few minutes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you for bringing this issue forward. I wanted to ask the three ladies on the panel if the idea of recapture would work for you within, within where we're at right today with the way the ordinance is currently today, if we added that recapture idea.
Actually, Habitat for Humanity in its deed restriction policy has a recapture. Okay. The silent second is the difference between the market value and what we sell the home. And the deed restriction is the first 10 years, there's no appreciation, and after that, there's 5%. But the money that they do make within that time after comes back to Habitat, which we use to build more homes.
Okay. Then maybe we could just get a quick comment from...
Because of our program is different, it does not work with us. We actually hold that reserve value in the land.
Okay.
Yes, I'd love to have the recapture clause.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just on the second, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. But for since you said it wasn't going to work, that's because you're already in perpetuity. So the idea of recapture is only if they sell the house. So it really doesn't even apply if there's no sale of the house.
It doesn't, but we also have the shared appreciation. So they are entitled to only a portion of the appreciation on their investment, not in the additional funds that are the land or the subsidy.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe have to be worked on. Okay. Thank you, Chair. I apologize that I have to leave. I had some other questions, but I want to belabor it. But I just wanted to add that personally, I was the house that my husband and I have been in for over 30 years. which is now paid off, I'm happy to say. But it started out in an affordable housing program. It was a federal FMHA program that actually did have a recapture because after 3 years, we were paying 1% interest, and after 3 years, we expanded the house, and we had to pay back all like 13% interest for each of those 3 years. So we went and refinanced, and then we were able to pay it all back. But the program did what it was supposed to do. It got us into our house when we had zero savings, and had to scrape together some money from friends and relatives. But the recapture idea I think is great, because then the money goes back into the same program, and you can move on with whatever you've accumulated from that, the appreciation. So thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing both of these items up. And I apologize, I have to leave. Aloha.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Thank you. Mr. Guzman, any comments or questions?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Can I start with the department first?
Yes, of course.
I believe the director mentioned that in accordance, when she was referring to the legislation that we have before us, that it could only apply to a niche policy. So could this be fashioned in a way to apply to a niche, and what is that niche policy?
Mr. Almeida.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Member Guzman. With regards to using the term niche in this particular sense in the overall housing pie, we view it as what Nahale does for the county through their program. So they apply regularly through the Affordable Housing Fund and have received funding to help support their program. We're very much in favor of their model and what they do. And for us, they're the niche player that helps keep their homes in perpetuity and assist in that particular area. Thank you.
So this would apply to Nahale, but not to the other two nonprofits. And so in crafting the buyback formula, is the buyback formula in this ordinance contradict what you folks are doing in Nahale, or is it detrimental to what you guys are doing?
I believe that the shared appreciation portion is ours. That's the way our program works. Oh, I'm sorry.
Corporation Counsel would like to chime in.
Yeah, if I may, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Guzman. Just for clarification, this would be changing 2.96, which is the requirement to build residential workforce housing units on a market development. Nahale, typically, when they do things, they're not subject to 2.96. So these restrictions wouldn't affect them, because typically when Nahale does something, it's an exempt project of some sort. So that would
but it would affect the other two
potentially.
I see.
And I want to say Habitat and Lokai are a little different too, because when they come in, typically they're doing their own projects, so it's 100% affordable, or they're buying units in a 201H project right now is what they're doing. So, and in the past when we've given them money, it's been out of the Affordable Housing Fund, so they're following those deed restrictions. And 2.96, the way it's worded right now, is less onerous than Lokai's requirements and Habitat's requirements. So oftentimes when you look at the residential workforce housing agreement drafted, it's stricter than what current 2.96 says, because they're required to do those things under their bylaws and guidelines. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. So just in a nutshell, this ordinance doesn't work at all for you folks. Is that what I'm getting at? Or you're trying to convey to us?
Ms. Dawson and Ms. Beesman?
We have a 30-year deed restriction. My understanding under the proposed amendment is if we draw funds from the Affordable Housing Fund, then any of those funds used on a project, then that unit would have to stay in perpetuity, affordable in perpetuity, instead of, using our deed restriction. And that would mean that we could not draw money from the Affordable Housing Fund because we have a 30-year deed restriction.
Okay. So you guys would be excluded, sounds like.
From the housing
From
fund,
the
yes.
housing fund, right,
Yes.
right. I have a question on the, and I'm not quite understanding on the buyback here formula. On the section, and I don't know who can answer this, maybe the maker of the bill, but on the, where is this little section? Oh, I believe it's on page 4, the improvements. So you're only allowed to have permitted capital improvements shall not exceed 10% of line 1, which line 1 is the initial purchase price. Any of you folks know whether there is a, I guess, a restriction on capital improvements on your homes?
Would any of you would like to respond to Mr. Guzman?
If I could, this part of the proposal differs from what Nahalio Maui does.
Okay.
Our home buyers do have to come to us for approval on improvements, and that's part of what we look at in terms of keeping the property affordable. If we allowed them to do any improvements, the house would soon be unaffordable to the next buyer. This caps it at 10% of that original price. So it is different.
Yeah, that's what I'm just trying to understand why would you cap the improvements not to exceed 10% of the purchase price? Because
so, Mr. Guzman, could we, when we come around to the maker of the bill, and perhaps they can explain
I'm just trying to understand
Ms. Cochran
the rationale behind that.
Can clarify for you. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So, Ms. Cochran is really the maker of the bill, but I'm allowing the committee members to participate in the comments and discussion with the panel before I call on Ms. Cochran in note to your questions and other comments. Mr. Atai?
No question, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. White? You're good. Mr. Carroll?
I'd just like to say that I'm very happy we have these 3 people before us, and we should always be looking at what works and what has been successful for so many years and try to make sure that we not only support them but try to expand on other art projects to make them as effective as theirs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Cochran, do you have any comments or questions for the department, Corporation Counsel, or the panel at this time?
Yeah, quickly for department, thank you for the breakdown, and nice to see some West Maui projects going. But do you have a breakdown on how long all these units will stay in affordability? The numbers are nice, but I think my intent of this whole entire bill is about keeping the homes that are being built in affordability. And it does matter how long that is. So is there a number to all these projects?
Mr. Almeida.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Member Cochran. All of these projects that are approved under 2.96 were approved after the changes made in December of 2014, so they follow the current ordinance as it's stated.
Uyoka has a
Mr. Uyoka is correct. He just mentioned to me that Kaiaulu decided to do 10 years across the board at their own discretion. They just made it 10 years for everyone. The others are following the ordinance in the tiered 5, 8, and 10 structure. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Department. I think it'd be helpful, I mean, if the committee doesn't mind, to just see how long it'll take for these units to fall out of affordability. Then here we are starting from square one again. I think that would really paint a kind of scary, important picture for everyone to start rethinking, and as to why this bill has started to try and rethink what it means, what deed restriction means, what perpetuity means, what a managed appreciation means, is what this is getting at. So I understand you want to build homes, you want to have units. The family living in a car, they want a roof over their heads. but also let's think about the next family. That family got to live and raise their family in that 25, 30 year, home. What about the next family? Their kids, kids, kids. So I'm hearing a lot of people, even testifiers came in to say they're still in the house that they grew up in. I being one of them, my mom is still there. So and Ms. Tasha Kama mentioned it, the local people, we're not intending to move anywhere. So this is also trying to build that niche, if you want to use that word, two different categories of housing. One is, you have the investment market, real estate, booming type of housing. Then you have this.
Excuse me, Ms.
You have the
Cochran, any
affordable.
questions? Any questions for the panel?
And so, let's see, I have questions. What do you folks think about those comments? Are you understanding what the intent is? Because I hear all of you, and I completely agree with what you do and love everything you folks do, really. I'm trying to go beyond that, and I think that can fit with everybody. I know Habitat, in the national level, you have that 30-year, you guys dig your heels in, it's gonna be 30, fine. But, there's other ways to go about this. So comments, I suppose, on what I just shared.
May I respond?
Of course.
I think that in talking to all the people that we interviewed for houses, we had something like 185 people that applied. And we had to narrow it down to 16, right? I did not hear anyone say, when can I sell it? That wasn't even an issue with any of them. It was getting, as I said earlier, out of that one-bedroom Ohana unit or the garage that the uncle made over for them or whatever into their own house with a steady roof over their head. It was being able to not have to pay the $2,800 a month for somebody else's house to rent and get into one where they're paying $2,000 a month and it's theirs, and know that that's the number for that 30-year mortgage. What happens in 25 or 30 years? Hey, when the kids grow up and go out on their own, if they're on the mainland, mom and dad may decide it's time to go do some traveling or whatever. This gives them that possibility of being able to do it. But today, it's not in their mindset. So that's why we're very comfortable with the 25 years. It also, because the other thing I think we need to consider too, is that because the appraisals come in so high, we're selling these houses for $380. The latest appraisal that came in was $505. That's a huge bonus, if you will. But that is the starting appraisal. And so any appraisal that at the time they get ready to sell, how much more is it really going to be? Can we continue with this bubble that we've got going in the real estate market? Or is it going to settle down sometime? And should they decide to sell, again, we could go to the 25-year mark and it might only be worth $5.25 then. So that's $20,000 additional. But according to our game plan here, they only get 25% of that. So they're going to get, 25% of 20,000 is 5,000 on top of what they paid for the house. So it's not a huge income maker. They'll get back the money that they paid in, to buy the house, yeah. So they can walk out of there with $385,000, but they're not really making money, so to speak. So it's not like they're going to take that and go buy something else where they start all over with another mortgage. And so I'm very comfortable with this the way it is and thinking that it's going to stay a long time. It's a neighborhood that is going to be so cohesive. I don't see any sales happening for a long time. I don't know if that answers.
Thank you.
Sort of. Chair, sorry, real quickly. So all these numbers and what Mr. Guzman was asking about, I think Autumn can share, and we have handouts that break it down, and it gives you a lot better numbers than you're quoting right now. So I mean, that could be another time. I mean, because it's
Right.
going to be very, very involved, and it took me a lot of revisiting. I think Mr. Uyoka knows too. A lot of discussion to really have it sink in and truly understand what this is saying. I think it's hard to just glance at it and really truly understand the deeper details and meaning and repercussions of what this is saying. So, but thank you, because I mean, you work in what you work in, and I get it, and so it's relating to your particular projects and what have you. So thank you for that.
So Ms. Dodson, did you want to
Yeah, I wanted
respond?
to respond as well if I could. First of all, I wanted to clarify that it is not international that has this policy.
International.
This is Habitat for Humanity Maui's board policy, deed restriction policy. And it was actually drafted in 2008, about the time that the Maui Nui Housing Task Force was working on this, and that's why we came up with a 30-year. We have one instance that hasn't gone through yet, but I wanted to tell you about where a kapuna living up at Waiahuli, who we built for quite a few years ago. And it's a little bit different because the Hawaiian Homelands restriction is only 10 years. It's much less than ours, but it gives you an idea of when a family, she is widowed and she's on dialysis and she lives alone in her house, and it's very dangerous. And she has approached us about selling her home on the open market. Her home was a starter home. We build very simple, decent homes. It's not like, you know, it's going to be out on the market for $500,000, I guarantee you. But for her, she needs to sell the home to be able to pull some money out and move to the Big Island and be able to live with her family there, someone who can take care of her. And that's the kind of situation we're talking about as far as their sole source of wealth. I happen to be chronically ill. I've been on disability several times in my life. If something were to happen to me tomorrow, the only asset I have is my home. If I went on disability, I couldn't pay my mortgage. I would be able to, though, pull the equity out of my house, sell it, get a small condo, or even move in with, my sister said she would build me a cottage. But I would have a place to go, and I would have the ability to live out the rest of my life on disability. If I didn't have this house and if I couldn't sell it and pull that equity out, I would be homeless again, because I was homeless once because of my disability. So for us, it's a sole source of wealth for our families, which are 80% and below. As I said, we don't have the instance of people trying to sell. We have the people wanting to pass this on for generations for their kids. And it is a source of wealth. We don't allow them to pull out money unless it's for improvements to the house. And that's why a lot of people lost their house during the recession, is because they pulled so much money out and then they couldn't afford their mortgage. So,
Thank you. So, Ms. Cochran, we will have another opportunity to have further discussion, and I've talked to Ms. Ness about the next round when we will talk further and perhaps at that time request some legislation if that will be. And the intent today was to surface this bill, have the discussion, and then there's no legislation today. So I can appreciate your participation and efforts for us to move forward, if we may, on this. I want to thank everyone for being here for this late hour. So before I come back to you, Ms. Cochran, Mr. Guzman, do you have a
Oh, yeah, I
green
just
light
had
to ask
that
a question?
question because, I mean, and I think Ms. Dodson kind of nailed my what was floating in my mind about the that section on improvements. And she made a statement that investment into the home is a source of wealth and equity. So when you make improvements to the house, it is investing in that source of wealth. Therefore, you build up more equity. So that's why I didn't understand why there's a 10% cap on this section on the improvement, and then it applies to line 1, which is the purchase price. So I'm having a hard time with that section, and I'm trying to understand where that actually goes, because I know a lot of people, including relatives that I know do invest in their home. They do make these improvements, and why are we capping them on these improvements to the home? Because it does build
Mr. Guzman,
equity. Yeah.
may I call on Ms. Cochran's aide, Autumn Ness, to respond to your question on to clarify the 10% cap that's noted on this bill?
Well, I think, Chair, I can get a more detailed response on the whole formula.
Okay.
I'm a little bit lost on that portion of it. So maybe I can,
Yeah.
I know we're kind of limited on time today.
Right, right, yeah.
Yeah, that was floating in my head when I saw that section on the improvements. But we can just do that at another time, because I know we're pushing 4:30 now.
Thank you. And then we have 1, 2, I have Bear quorum, so I have to call to defer this item. I don't have quorum. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. I do have Bear quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, we have Bear quorum. So, members, if understand that you're going to follow up, perhaps to do, or do you want staff to come back with the information by getting that from Ms. Ness for your information?
Either way.
Okay,
sure, yeah.
so I'll make note of that for staff to try and review it with Ms. Ness on that as the aide to Ms. Cochran. So, members, first of all, I really want to thank the panel for being here. And I thank you for the work that you do to meet the income needs, those that have the needs. That I think it's only this kind of entities that provide for that. So I want to thank you very much for being part of our deliberation and sharing all of your expertise. And if there are no objections, members, I would like to defer this item.
No objections.
Thank you. Members, we have completed today's agenda. I want to thank our staff, Shelley Espileta, Samalu Mataafa, and Stacy Vinare. And I especially want to thank you, members, as well as Ms. Cochran and Ms. Sugimura, for joining us today on the ongoing conversation that I feel very hopeful. We're going to come through with some very good. This is my last committee meeting for 2017, so I'd like to wish all of you a nice evening and mele kalikimaka haole makahiki ho. Mahalo. Meeting is adjourned.
Will she